AskReddit by Kaleidoscope then 8238. What cliché about the US do you hear most that isn't true not anymore? Once met a woman from New Zealand in Europe who said she would never come to the US because of the mafia everywhere. What lol? That's like avoiding Canada because of Bigfoot. The majority of us are not like the weirdos making the headlines. It's almost as if the people in charge are not an accurate reflection of who they supposedly represent. Us beer is no longer just Budweiser and Miller. The us craft beer makers are some of the top in the world now. And at least where I live, Northwest, local and national microbrews are available everywhere from gas stations to chain restaurants. That we all wear shoes in the house. It all depends on the cultural background of each household. I come from an Asian immigrant family and we do not wear shoes in the house. Also depends if you are from the north, where snow slush is very common in winter, vs the south. Generally it's more common to wear shoes indoor in the southern us vs northern us, where people typically take them off to avoid getting the house dirty. That we're the fattest country on earth. Quite a few countries have surpassed us in obesity. I do believe we're one of the biggest big countries though. Most that surpassed us are the Pacific Islands, most of whom people haven't heard of. That they're rude. Certainly, I've encountered some that are. However, the vast majority that I've encountered are very polite, gracious, and generous people. Said it before, and will say it again. Americans are the best at small talk. Signed, a Canadian. The ugly American going to Europe and breaking all their norms loud, brash, drunk, always wearing a USA shirt. The English tool that crown from us. I remember visiting over the last 2 decades and more people are relieved that I'm not English, or Italian for that matter. I'm not saying no American is like that. But an English stag or hen party is something Europeans run from. As a Dane, I by far prefer the company of Americans over that of the English. There are no cats in America. And the streets are paved with cheese. They're all fat. Whilst this is in some cases true, America is, or at least was, the last time I was over, getting better. And other countries are getting worse. In modern America, obesity is increasingly correlated with income. Like most negative American tropes, it's just making fun of poor people. Not everyone in the US is constantly eating fast food and shooting guns. Some of us actually enjoy kale and reading books. Dig books, can't really handle kale. Somehow it's got my least favorite lettuce white texture combined with the farty aftertaste of cabbage. I could handle one or the other in the name of health but both is a bit much. Can eat, do not enjoy. But somehow I like broccoli, especially with a slight char. That nobody here has electric tea kettles that they're not even stocked in department stores. I've found them in almost every house I've been to in the US. And in every store that sells home goods except when they are temporarily out of stock. Yes, even though they're less efficient than in many other countries because of our voltage standards. Some of the people who say this are from the US, so I think it's likely regional, but it's definitely not true that it's universally hard to find electric kettles or tea drinkers in the US. Americans are big tea drinkers, but it's iced tea during the day, and herbal tea at night. Coffee has a near monopoly on the morning. That we're terrible and rude tourists, the ugly American abroad. Americans are certainly loud and can be entitled. Often it's due to cultural differences such as being surprised that you get very little ice in your drinks and they don't do refills. Also, sweet tea isn't a thing in Europe. The rudest tourists in the world are, by far, mainland Chinese and the British, specifically the English. Sweet tea, southern style, isn't even a thing out here in SoCal either. That we don't have good cheese. Wisconsin cheesemakers keep winning international awards. We're good at it here. We're not actually especially litigious. Pretty par for the course. Plus being more litigious happens when you gave more wealthier people who can take advantage of the law, so it's not inherently a bad thing. Really, the US would be healthier if we had more litigation, because it would mean more people are wealthy enough to access the judicial system. There's also a case to be made that fear of litigation results in much safer products. Litigation becomes somewhat of an expedient way to enact standards for safety that legislative bodies would no doubt be too slow to act upon. The cliché that Americans are universally loud and obnoxious. While travelers from any country can sometimes be overbearing, many Americans are respectful and considerate. This stereotype overlooks the diversity and kindness found throughout the US, making it an outdated and unfair generalization. You are not at any major risk of being victim to gun violence while visiting the country 9 times out of 10. The gun violence is coming from an area that doesn't care about you and you will not visit. And that 10th time is an extreme outlier case. Also, chances are if you're getting shot, you're partaking in something to get your ass shot. And no, mass shootings hardly make up the overall statistics, and I'm talking about actual mass shootings, not a gang beef that flares up at school. Mass shooting data is not understood for its real makeup. Mass shooting is simply 2 or more people affected. The vast majority of these are actually police situations against gangs and other violent felons. Historically, school shootings are actually lower now, and are a smaller subset of mass shootings. It is, of course, greatly outsized by media reporting. Americans don't travel internationally, or Americans don't have passports. Millennials and Gens may not be able to afford to buy homes, but they love to travel the world and make Instagram-worthy memories. Also, America is huge, so there's less need to travel. We aren't all loud asshole tourists. Sure, they exist, but it's far from all of us. The most consistently loud and obnoxious tourists in my experiences have been English people. It's easily the Chinese. I live and work with lots of Chinese people, and I like them, but Chinese tourists are the worst. Not all Americans own guns. In fact, most Americans don't. Only about 1/3 own guns. People seem to think that because we have more guns than people that it must mean everyone has several guns. It doesn't. It means a handful of people have a shitload of guns. I mean, 1 in 3 people is not a handful. If the average gun owner owns 3-ish guns, then it is not that weird that there are more guns than people. Most people who I know who own guns own multiple. It's kind of weird in gun circles to only own 1 gun. Fox News talked a lot of shit about Seattle and Portland during COVID. In fact, we're doing great and it's a beautiful place to live. If the propaganda keeps a bunch of conservative assholes away, I'm okay with that. And for the people who want to argue about Seattle, Portland, yes, we have the same exact issues as other large metropolitan areas do, but we are far from the image Fox News presents. The idea that all American parents kick their kids out on their 18th birthdays, or even most of them. Adults living with their parents are more common than ever, and I personally knew far more people that couldn't wait to leave than weren't allowed to stay. I often run across people trying to plan a road trip not realizing how huge the US is. Even people who live here often don't realize how huge. It takes 4-6 days of grueling driving as fast and as long as you safely can to make it all the way across. You will see nothing. You will drive, refuel, and sleep 10-14 hours a day. The US is huge. The environments people live in are numerous and diverse. It's a big, big place. That everyone drives a giant truck and carries a gun everywhere. That Americans are rude and aggressive. We frequently are in NY state shopping, and almost without fail the people we encounter are very friendly and helpful. Buffer love is a thing. You couldn't pick Ukraine out on a map.